In this video, I'm going to rebuild the carburetor on this Stihl 25 chainsaw. I ordered this carburetor repair kit off of Amazon. The link to this is in the video description, so make sure to check that out. And this carburetor kit also applies to many other Stihl models, so not just the 25, and I'll put all the different models that it corresponds to also in the video description. So this may help you rebuild your carburetor on your other model Stihl. First thing you're going to want to do is take off the cover. This exposes the air filter, the air intake, and underneath it here is the carburetor. I'll also leave in the video description a link to a brand new carburetor. You may want to check that out and see what the cost of just a brand new carburetor is versus rebuilding the one you have. Once you have the cover off, you want to first remove the air filter with a flathead screwdriver and by prying on the tabs on each side. Should pop right off. Next thing you want to remove is this plastic part. Just lift straight up. Might be a good time to change your spark plug. Your spark plug's located here. Just pull this boot off and unscrew the spark plug with a bar wrench. A bar wrench is one of these. I'll leave the link to that in the video description. You just put it on here and remove the spark plug. And you take your new one, screw it back in. Be careful not to strip the threads. Once you have it seated finger tight, take your bar wrench and snug her down, and then place your boot. Next thing we're going to do is remove the air inlet here, and this is an 8mm socket. Next thing you want to do is remove this clip here, and you do it by rotating this and then sliding the pin out of the slot. Next thing you're going to want to do is pull this off. You may have to pull forward on the carburetor itself. Next, you're going to want to hold down the trigger to expose. You're going to want to hold down the trigger to expose this. You can take a flathead screwdriver and kind of pry it up. There. You can relax the trigger, and the carburetor housing should slide straight out. Once you have it out, you can disconnect the fuel line here. Make sure to get any debris in the fuel line if you have any. And your carburetor now is removed. Next, using some painter's tape, I like to just cover up the hole to ensure that nothing gets down in there. You probably also want to clean all this off before we reinstall the carburetor, so this is a good time to do that. Just make sure you don't get anything in the hole. So I'm going to go ahead, once I got my carburetor clean, go ahead and open up the rebuild kit to my really dull razor blade. Now I can start to tear down the carburetor. If it's been on there for a while, it may be a little stuck, so you may can take a razor blade and kind of trim the edges here, break it free. There you have it. You can see inside here on this side, remove that screw. There's a spring. There's this cantilever piece here, a retaining pin there, and then there's your needle up in that corner. So we're gonna have to remove all of that. And to do that, you start with this screw here. Once you remove the screw, it's going to allow this retaining detent kind of fulcrum piece here, the old pivot pin, the old spring, and the old float needle. You can go ahead and just remove the screw all the way. Now in your new rebuild kit, you're gonna get this little metallic cap looking thing, and that goes here. You can see kind of that different color gray cap. You can remove that by either using a punch or drilling a small hole. I'd probably rather use a little punch just to kind of minimize all the fragments, metallic shards or fragments getting down in your carburetor. We're gonna clean it anyway, but it's just a lot cleaner. And remove that. You'll slide this down in there, and then you can kind of see, I don't know if it's coming in clear on the video, but you can kind of see a indentation in a circular ring shape there where they have punched it in. It expands the sides, and it seats it in there cleanly. I recommend doing that versus drilling. You can see I messed up a little bit there, and I punched a hole. It's not, well, you can see I messed up a little bit there, and I made an indentation whenever I broke through. But I think it's better to do that than to take a drill bit, because you can see there's two very little holes here, which I did not mess up, and back in this corner that I also didn't mess up. So you really don't want to mess up those. So you just have to be really careful whenever you're taking that out. Be a little bit more careful than I was. Once you have everything removed, you can go ahead and spray it with a little brake parts cleaner. Make sure everything's nice and clean. Now you can set your new cap back over the orifice, and then take something kind of flat like the back of this, put it on top, and you don't have to tap it much. And that's not coming out. Hit it with a little brake parts cleaner again. And now you're ready to reassemble the new pieces. Alright, before we reassemble everything, go ahead and start your screw here, just, you know, a quarter of a turn to where it's just barely seated in there. Next thing you're going to do is put your float needle in, and then you can see on the bottom side of this bracket there's a little divot. That divot slides into the spring. So this part's the trickiest. How do you get everything in there? So I like to slide the spring in last, and it's kind of a pain to do, but it may take you several attempts to do this, and both hands. But once you get it in there, tighten down the screw and press on it to make sure it's operating. Once you have everything put back together on this side, you can go ahead and start putting the new gaskets back on. First one that goes on is this one with the big hole in the middle. The next one, you can see that kind of wheel and spoke looking thing that goes facing down this way. This is the diaphragm. And then once you have those two on in that order, you can go ahead and put your top back on with the 4 screws. Now to take off the top, use a large flathead screwdriver. Remove the top center screw. Go ahead and remove the top center screw here. You'll see this piece go on the bottom, which is this is the new one. And then this piece. Once you have these two gaskets off the top plate and the bottom plate's exposed, down in here is a debris screen, and that also comes in the rebuild kit, so you can remove that with a pick. And once the debris screen is removed, go ahead and clean off everything really well with brake parts cleaner and reinstall the new debris screen. Like such. Spray off the top part. Clean it off really well. And go ahead and start installing this gasket first. And that gasket next. Once you have those on, you can slide the top back on and reinstall the main screw. With that, the carburetor is rebuilt and you're ready to reinstall it back on your chainsaw. Alright, so now we're ready to put the carburetor back on to the chainsaw. This was on the carburetor as I was rebuilding it, but this is basically the interface to the chainsaw body. right here. This gasket does not come in the rebuild kit. Mine's still in pretty good shape, so I'm just going to reuse it. Alright, before you put the carburetor back on, you're going to want to reinstall this and make sure it slides over and fits like that. You're going to want to pull the fuel line over to this side and go ahead and start pushing the carburetor back. At this point, you're going to want to go ahead and get the trigger linkage back reinstalled. Just make sure it sits in there nice and slide and push everything back into place. And then bring the fuel line over to the side. Go ahead and push it back onto its connection. At this point, you can go ahead and reinstall the trigger linkage. The trigger linkage fell out like mine did. It's no big deal. You can get it back in there. It's just kind of a pain. Once you got everything on there, it's last thing to do is install the choke linkage. The long bar goes inside of here. There's a slot, you slide it in there. And then slide it in that way. Once that's in, you can begin to reinstall everything. I've cleaned off the air handler. Slide that on. Go ahead and tighten them down. Once you have that tightened down, go ahead and reinstall your air filter. Oh, and then this little piece slides right down behind the air filter. Don't forget to do that. And put your cover back on. And there you have it. One last thing that you may want to change out while you're doing this is the fuel filter. By carefully using a pick and just carefully pulling it off of your fuel line in here. This one's pretty clean, but I'll leave a link to this in the video description as well in case you want to change yours out while you're at it. So that's pretty much a Stihl chainsaw tune-up. I'll leave everything that you need in the video description below. Make sure you hit the like button and the subscribe button if this helped you out. Thanks for watching.